Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, May 27th, 2023, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 Republican presidential primary race. Now, in tune with many of my recent videos, this race has been taking most of the attention and most of the political oxygen when it comes down to the mainstream media's coverage and discussion about our current presidential race. And the reason why that is because it is a very ever-evolving race that now numerous candidates expected to announce or already have announced have now shaken up the race in a way that we otherwise may not have otherwise expected. I just used that word twice. I apologize for that. But what we're looking at here specifically in this video is the endorsements. The endorsements that former senators, current senators, former representatives and current representatives, governors, national party leaders, whatever it might be, people that have influence over the national GOP, where they stand in terms of overall endorsements and where these candidates are against one another. Now, the 2024 race is, as I said, ever evolving. It changes day after day, but one thing has remained pretty consistent, and that is the lack of endorsements within this video. Now, before we actually talk about the endorsements, I do want to address that numerous members of the Senate, the House, and other members and other delegations have refused to endorse in this race, ranging all the way from Marco Rubio of Florida to Mitch McConnell of Kentucky to Ted Cruz of Texas to Katie Britt of Alabama, who was recently elected on the back of a presidential endorsement from Donald Trump. Numerous U.S. representatives have announced that they are not endorsing in the 2024 race. Numerous governors, including statewide parties that otherwise may have endorsed in other circumstances. And what we know from this is that because there are a significant number of non-endorsements, it's important to recognize the ones that do endorse. Generally speaking, endorsements only come from those who expect candidates to win because, in most cases, politicians do not want to be wrong, so they will endorse the person they are most secure at, but it looks like it's up in the air, at least in the eyes of many of these candidates, and quite frankly, they do not want to be wrong, including those that may have been otherwise big advocates for Donald Trump to enter back into the race in 2024 or enter any type of contest supporting him in 2016, 2020, and now are pulling back. But this video is about endorsements. We've covered the part about those who have declined to endorse in the race. And now we're going to take a look at the, quite frankly, few endorsements that many of the other candidates besides President Trump have received, but in totality, all of the endorsements that we have so far. What you see on the screen is the FiveThirtyEight tracker of the 2024 election endorsements. And you can see here that a number of Republicans who have announced have received some endorsements, but very heavily lopsided in favor of President Trump. These are Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, who has announced that he is not running, but so did Glenn Youngkin, and now he's walking back on that, and we'll talk about that in later today's video. Tim Scott is announced. He is running. Ron DeSantis recently announced, but picked up many of these endorsements before he decided to run. So what we're looking at here are a number of endorsements that are ranked by a point system that FiveThirtyEight has categorized. We can run through it really quickly because it is quite brief. So you get 10 points from current national party leaders. Only one candidate has those, and it's Tim Scott, who has John Thune, the U.S. Senate Republican whip. This also includes former presidents and vice presidents. 8 points for governors, 6 points for senators, 5 points for former presidential and vice presidential nominees. That would be Sarah Palin and other losing candidates. Former national party leaders, Mitt Romney would also be thrown up in there. 2024 presidential candidates who have dropped out. 3 points for U.S. representatives and mayors of large cities. 2 points for officials in statewide elected offices and state legislative leaders. So not a state representative, but maybe a House majority leader in the Florida State House would be categorized as one of these state legislative leaders. So what we're looking at here is a categorization and a systematic breakdown of the endorsements that we have seen thus far. But as you can tell from just the circles, one candidate in specific has been taking up a significant portion of these endorsements, which is indicative of where he stands currently in the primary race. I look at these endorsements not as super influential points in elections because I don't think endorsements actually matter as much as they do when it comes down to a presidential endorsement. I think when you look at some of these endorsements that Donald Trump has received, okay, Clay Higgins, a representative from Louisiana, does that endorsement really make a difference? The answer is probably not. But what endorsements do tell is a story. They tell a story, which is why they matter a lot more than just simply the electoral benefit that they have. What they tell us is where the national party is, where people think the race is going to go, and who is the strongest candidate for the general election in a lot of cases, but in this case, maybe not so much. What I'm saying here is that the endorsements matter because they tell us this story. They're going to give us a general idea and a general rundown about how 2024 might end up and where people think they're going to be right and maybe where they think they're going to be wrong. For the same reason that many Republicans have refused to endorse in this race, many of them have flocked towards President Donald Trump. And the reason might not necessarily be because they think he has the most electable chance in 2024, because he has the best policy, but because they know he's going to win. The big thing about politics is you never want to be on the losing side. Duh. In any type of thing, whether it's a baseball game or a congressional race, being on the losing side sucks. But when you align yourself with losing candidates, it also sucks. And Donald Trump, more than anyone, should know that. While 2022 was a disaster, I mean, you look at the races where Donald Trump had a heavy impact on, it was a disaster. You see it in the gubernatorial races here, where Republicans were propped up by Donald Trump just to lose to a Democrat in a swing state. Pennsylvania with Doug Mastriano, Arizona with Kari Lake. You have it in Kansas, you have it in Michigan, you have it in Wisconsin, you have it in Maine, you have it in New Mexico, where Donald Trump's influence pushed Republicans across the finish line, but not to the general election. And then looking at the Senate races, don't even get me started on Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire. These are states where Donald Trump had a direct impact, or his silence had a direct impact, might I say, and resulted in a weaker nominee that lost in the general election. Democrats did well in 2022 because of the mainstream candidate here in the Republican race. So knowing that, that's the thing. Donald Trump aligned himself with a lot of the losing candidates, but there is also a very common factor about that all, that he did prop up the losing candidates. That Ron DeSantis endorsed different people that did not make it through the Republican primary. Why? Because Donald Trump's influence was so strong, he dictated the way Republican Party voters would vote in elections he wasn't even running in. That is also a takeaway that we can take from this. He doesn't have the best electoral, mind when it comes down to choosing the right candidates, but what he does have is heavy amounts of influence. Power that can drive him to victory in this race. So these endorsements, I think, are more indicators that the Republican Party today does not believe that Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley or Mike Pence or Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis can defeat Donald Trump. And looking at some of these names that have already endorsed Donald Trump, while there are a number that have refused to, he has some heavy hitters. Governor Henry McMaster, when his senator and the governor that he served alongside with before as lieutenant governor, has now endorsed Donald Trump over Nikki Haley, over Tim Scott. Cindy Hyde-Smith, a senator in Mississippi. She wouldn't want to be wrong about the endorsement. Here she is with Donald Trump. Marsha Blackburn, a senator from Tennessee. J.D. Vance, who owes his election to Donald Trump, endorsing him. Endorsements from Oklahoma, West Virginia. And these are states where an endorsement might not necessarily provide a huge electoral bump, but it's an indicator that they are abandoning people that they may have otherwise served alongside with in the Senate, may have otherwise served alongside with in a state legislature, in Congress, whatever it might be. Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, Bill Hagerty in Tennessee, Steve Daines, Lindsey Graham. These endorsements tell us that Donald Trump is reeling them in, and this is only the beginning. And to be fair to Donald Trump's defense too, or not to his defense, but to explain this, we also have to recognize the reason why he has many of these endorsements is because of where he was in the presidential primary. You can see that since November 14th, 2022, Donald Trump has maintained a lead. He was the only candidate in the race at this point in time, and of course, he would be in the lead as the only candidate. But everybody knew that Ron DeSantis was going to run. Everybody knew that Nikki Haley was going to run. Everybody knows that Mike Pence is probably going to run as well. But what I'm saying here is that because Donald Trump got out early, he assured himself every early endorsement. Other candidates were not a guarantee. I mean, they knew, but there was also a possibility that they wouldn't. And that uncertainty allowed them to go with the one safe candidate that they knew would probably have the highest chance of winning and has already declared. So there's two factors there. He got the early endorsements because he was so early, but also other candidates weren't a guarantee. For candidates to go out there and announce their bid with zero endorsements is not exactly the best place to be. All of these candidates, besides I think Nikki Haley, came into the presidential race with endorsements from somewhat at least, prominent Republican officials, whether in their home state or nationally. You see it with Mike Pence. You see it with Tim Scott, who got the endorsement before he announced. Right? Ron DeSantis received endorsements before he announced. These candidates received endorsements, but what we found here is that because there was no guarantee about the remaining candidates, who some of them announced, Ron DeSantis, for instance, 6 months after Donald Trump, There was no assurance that he was going to be into the race. So to endorse someone against Donald Trump, who has already been declared, puts a target on your head for future elections down the line. And also, people just don't want to flip-flop. They endorsed Donald Trump, and while many might be changing their minds internally, they can't change their minds publicly. We know the influence of Donald Trump, and it would be a very, very negative thing if a Republican senator from Tennessee was to come out and say, I endorsed Donald Trump, but now seeing the list of candidates that were always there for consideration, I am now switching my endorsement. It's a bad look, and rightfully so. And Donald Trump will rail against them till the day he dies, because that's the type of environment and culture he has cultivated within the GOP. Because if you're not with him, you're against him, which explains why so many people are not in full-fledged support of Ron DeSantis right now. To be fair to all of the other candidates, Donald Trump, besides Mike Pence, does not seem to be super upset with Nikki Haley or Tim Scott in the race, or potentially some other contenders. He does not seem to be super upset about their entrance, doesn't seem to be attacking them, rather saying good luck or they're nice people. But for Ron DeSantis, on the full offense. Why? Because he's losing to him. So what we know here is that those who align themselves with Ron DeSantis, should Donald Trump win this nomination, which it looks like he's going to do, I can guarantee you, once he makes it that far, a lot of the other people that tacked onto Ron DeSantis right now will not be brought over to their next election. Donald Trump will make sure that these people do not receive the primary endorsement and maybe even actively intervene in their races to endorse somebody else. He's done it before with those who voted to impeach him, and 9 out of the 10 were gone by the next election. 9 out of the 10 Republicans who voted to convict him or impeach him in the House were gone. What happened to them? They lost their primaries. Why? Donald Trump influenced them or shoved them out so far that they chose not to run for re-election. Asking a member of Congress to not run for re-election is insane. These people have it guaranteed that they are assured a permanent position in politics, which is how career politicians begin. And for those people in sometimes safe districts to willingly pull themselves out of the race means they have a lot of people telling them, you're not going to win it, leave gracefully. Because another thing that politicians don't like to do is lose by losing an election, is to not be reelected. Retiring or resigning is more noble in their eyes because it's not shameful. Voters didn't reject you. You left on your own accord. That's the way you can spin it as someone who decides to retire from Congress. So when 9 out of the 10 were gone, that sends a message here that those who are not with Donald Trump are against him. And that's the problem for Ron DeSantis and those who support him, which is why he's not pulling in the endorsements that you otherwise might think. Looking at the people on the DeSantis side, I'm not impressed. You have the state auditor in Alabama. You have a representative from the state of Florida, the state that he's from. A representative from Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, and Virginia. No senators, people that are involved in Florida statewide politics. And that's pretty much it. For Donald Trump, on the other hand, he has governors, current governors, senators, current senators, many more representatives than him, and a number of state legislative leaders or statewide officials. Ken Paxton in the state of Texas, a known attorney general versus a little-known state auditor in the state of Alabama. The lieutenant governor in the state of Texas, the second most populous state and second most influential in the Republican primary in 2024. You have other people across a number of these races. Daniel Cameron, a candidate for governor, the Republican nominee for the 2023 Kentucky gubernatorial race, a very well-known name across the state, could very well be the next governor. My point is that Donald Trump has pulled in the right people. Tim Scott, big props to him for getting the senator from South Dakota and John Thune from South Dakota. But honestly, I don't think this holds much influence. John Thune is a big name, but he's not Mitch McConnell. He's not Paul Ryan. He's not John Boehner. He's not even a name that I would say the average American would recognize, even if they pay attention to politics. However, for many of these other people, while they may not necessarily be just that, they are well known enough within their state. South Dakota is one of the smallest states in the entire country, and the electoral bump there will be very, very minimal. And what it also says here is that these people are very close with Tim Scott. It's not that they think he's going to win. And anyone can read polling data. Anyone can see that Tim Scott is hovering at around 2% nationwide, where Donald Trump is at 58%. So point being here, and what I hope you take away from the endorsements that we have seen thus far, is that number one, Donald Trump is doing so well because he got out early. People want to be assured of this early endorsement, and they aren't guaranteed that other candidates will enter into the race. Number two, people just don't want to be wrong. I think that's really what we need to understand here, that because Donald Trump is the likeliest to win this race, even if they don't necessarily agree with him, they're going to add to it. It's the same type of political pandering we have seen for generations in this country, and it works, and it's going to propel Donald Trump to win this election. Also, we have to recognize that 2022 was an electoral disaster, but a huge success for Donald Trump in the primary. In almost every single race he directly intervened, he got the race to go his way in the primary. And that's where he needs to get to, because the general election is a whole nother beast. That's not what Donald Trump is worried about today. He's worried about winning this race. And what we've seen is that of those who have made endorsements, there are many who have chosen not to, but those who are in positions of power are flocking towards Donald Trump. They are deciding here that Donald Trump is the right candidate for them, whether that means because they think he's going to win or they truly believe in his agenda and his policies and his positions for his White House bid. Regardless, though, the impact is the same, and the main takeaway here is while endorsements may have some type of electoral influence, I'm looking at them to help tell a story, to help dictate where the Republican Party currently is in terms of ideology, where they currently are in terms of support, and what they want for 2024. And all signs are pointing to one single person, the same person who has been dominating Republican politics for the past 6 years straight, going on 7. And that is former President Donald Trump, who will likely be the 2024 Republican presidential nominee. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.